Click on the subscribe button, especially the bell on the right side. Otherwise, you will miss the latest videos.
Come to that story. How did you land up losing finally, recently, all the money and giving it off to your brother? How did you feel at that time? What was your reaction?
So I first narrated the first time when I left Tanzania to come here, and I left everything, all my personality, my ego. Then the second time was that time I was young. So this time I was an adult. I lost everything, fame, money, political recognition. And then so in Africa, I got there, I lost everything. So I started building up my life again. And finally, because of this story that my mother gave me, I was now very curious about Jyotish. But like I said, because of my past negative experiences with Indian tradition, well, not with Indian people per se, which was my first love, really, I decided that I needed to look at the West. So I saw the West as the civilized world, and the civilized world has its cradle in Greece. Okay, so I decided I needed to find out and see what's going on in my future. And in one of my vacation trips in the U.S., someone helped me contact a very, very good Western astrologer. So then I went to him and got a reading done, and I took meticulous notes because now, from my mother's experience, but that was different. That worked out well. Here's my experience, not my mother's. So I saw this astrologer, Western astrologer. He gave me a full reading. I had a year plan, and I was very dutiful in looking at what he had said that whole year. A year later, I come back to the U.S., call him up. I say, hey, nothing worked. And he says, well, your ascendant was off, and by 20 minutes or an hour or something like this. I said, anyway, they were having a conference. And it was a Greek astrology conference. So he's one of the best astrologers. I said, okay, well, I'll go meet this guy who teaches Greek astrology. So I was so fascinated by Greeks and Greek. And besides, Greeks were the cradle of Western civilization, which I upheld to the highest value, which is why I've got 2 engineering degrees. I've got my master's here. I had this value. My value in terms of appreciation was towards the Western culture. And now I'm talking about the cradle of the Western civilization, which is Greeks. And now this unfoldment of this Greek astrology was so amazing. It's pretty much like Jyotish in terms of its complexities. They have Time Lords, which is nakshatras. They have all these other things. But what fascinated me more wasn't the techniques. What fascinated me more about Greek astrology was the meaning behind these things. So for instance, Aristotle and Plato, Socrates, they used astrology to a greater extent, and they would argue, or they would analyze, why would a planet up there, and they'd call it, why would a stupid planet up in the sky affect me as a small person on Earth, and affect you differently? And so they went into the logic and the philosophy behind it, which actually was a very good base for me to understand Jyotish. Although Greek astrology wasn't proven, I really love the analysis behind it, the logic behind it. Long story short, which I kind of told you that I got involved with other things. The reason why, once I met Hartifo, I found out that the way he taught, in spite of meeting other people, his teaching was truly, truly amazing, and I connected with what he was teaching. And he was teaching from the Shastra, which to me was very amazing. And he taught it that was palatable to a Western taste, which was my taste. Okay, he and among of other few white people, Americans, were instrumental in me coming to this tradition. So when we look at, I'm kind of explaining some of the background because you have to know the rises and highs. So at that time, when I came to the West, I also, while I was doing Greek astrology and Greek philosophy, somebody in the West, people, they wanted to start in a college of Ayurveda. And they realized they cannot find anyone who would actually do that. And somebody through the grapevine, they heard that, well, maybe this guy who's always focusing on nonprofits and wants to do something in the world, he might be able to do it. So I got a call from California, and they said that they wanted to invite me over for 3 days and to do some consulting work and see whether we could set up this college. So I decided to, I looked at it within 3 days and I said, it won't work. For a lot of reasons, I gave them my analysis. They were so impressed with the way I presented it, and they knew within a few days what was wrong, why it won't work. These were the reasons. And then I was about to go sailing because that was my ulterior motive, to go to California, because that's where I sail. Before I left, we had a meeting, and they said, what would it take for you to move here? Now, at that point, there are a couple of things. I got curious about the Vedic tradition, mostly because of what Socrates and Plato and Aristotle had talked about. Some of the stories were so similar to some of the stories my dad told me about the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita and things like that. So I said, okay, what we can do is create a nonprofit organization, and I would raise funds. And what we would do is, because they, not me, wanted to do something with the Indian tradition, and they're all Americans, Western Americans, white Americans, and I was the only Indian who was there as a management, and they were interested in the Vedic tradition. I said, I brought the venture capital concept into the nonprofit world.
Oh.
Because you see what happens in our tradition. If you're an expert in something, you're very good at what you do, you don't have the skill of manager, you don't have money. So a lot of specialists have that problem, right? So I realized what we could, and I thought what we could do then, I could do the fundraising, and I bring in my management experience, and we'll fund these organizations. And that's how I got into supporting Jyotish organization, Ayurvedic, Vastu, Tantra. So there were all these groups around in the US. And at that time, because of my lifestyle in California, now I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, I decided, because they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, within 5 days I moved from Washington to San Francisco.
Oh.
And then there I was my own boss, and I traveled in first class and had first class hotels, and had a few people working for me, and those money. And it was really a life to dream of. I was in a 15-acre paradise. I always smelled a different flower. I had a guy working for me who was a horticulture. And, so money was not a problem. I was in a most comfortable job. I was doing what I was doing.
So again, from a low, you came to a high.
Exactly. I came to a high. So at that time, in that high, and dealing with all of these great scholars in America who have written many, many books in the Vedic tradition or in the Vedic field, I spent 2 years interacting with them, and I began to realize something was missing. Just my intuition, and I didn't know what that was. And here I am, fortifying, building up their businesses, their knowledge. And that started eating me up because I didn't know what I was promoting. I didn't know what I was doing. I was funding them, I was bringing the management skill and making them more stronger. But what are they really doing? Am I really promoting the right tradition? Am I really promoting the right culture? I mean, it doesn't matter whether someone is, whether it's true or not. The question is, what is the authenticity of the tradition, which I was more interested in. And this started eating me up. And it bothered me for about 3 months until I came to a point I said, okay, I really, although I never wanted a guru, I need to find a guru. I never wanted to study Sanskrit because I'm horrible at languages. I need to study Sanskrit because all the juice, all the amritam is in the Vedic knowledge. Everything that I need to know about the world is in that. I knew that. I didn't know anything about it, but I just knew it was there. And to access that, I need to know Sanskrit. And in order to do that, I needed to study. And in order to do that, I needed to find a guru, which I never wanted to do.
Okay.
So then I was like, okay, very cushy lifestyle, comfortable, money, everything. In fact, I went to India and I did a shopping. I stayed in some great places and went around because we were building this great hall, and bought in some exquisite things like that, So very good life. But when this thing happened, I decided, well, what am I doing? Now, because of my commitment to the organization that I'd committed to run this, I couldn't break out. And my value was I gave my word, I cannot back off. So I go back to California. I was promoting our organization in Los Angeles. And then I came back to San Francisco. One of my business partners said, we need to sell the property. I could have said, all right, we'll take the business out of this, because it was just a location, and move it to a better place. In fact, I found some really nice places in San Francisco where I could have run the organization from. But to me, because I'd made a commitment, and I couldn't get out, when my partner said they want to sell the property, I said, let's close down. And so all that luxury that was there, the money, the fame, and it was a really, really good life, came to an end.
All that came to an end.
By
That
choice.
must be really hard times.
No, this was by choice.
By choice. This time it happened by choice.
This time it happened by choice. And what I was really looking for was a teacher. Now, I had one thought, that I should go to India and interview all these gurus, because I don't like these gurus who make me work. Yeah, do seva business and all that, I didn't want that. I wanted a guru who teaches in English. And then I said, what I'll do is take a year sabbatical, go over India, travel around, and interview. And then I said, I did not take, here in the US, I would not take Greyhound, which is our local bus. Yeah. And then I expect to travel in trains in India. I said, there's no way. And I don't know the language.
So the ego was coming in.
Exactly, that's the point. Because you see, a lot of the point, if you really look at my story, a lot of the times we think we can do something, that our blessings are our own doing. And we forget that our blessings are given. Yeah. So, and I thought that way. With my Western mind, that I have done everything, I can do everything, and so on and so on. So
that's a typical. Actually, that's a typical modern mind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break. Okay. And we're going to be back in part 2 of the video. Okay. And stay tuned, because more Jyotish discussions will come in. Thank you. Thank you so much. We are back. We are back with Swamiji, and this is the point in the story. Now, some of you might be thinking, why this kind of story? Why all the highs and lows? Because that's what's life, and especially to the younger generation. I know what happens in USA. Okay, maybe you might agree on this. Before we come to your story, I want you, because you are so experienced here with the US astrologers. Yeah. It's like considered taboo not to say anything negative.
That's right.
Any negative event or discouraging event.
Yeah.
I do understand that's so important for Western culture. And in Indian culture, it's the reverse.
Right.
You go to an astrologer and he doesn't tell you any negative event, and that happens in 6 months or 1 year, okay? You go back to the astrologer and tell him, hey, you don't know astrology. Or at least they talk about behind the backs of the astrologer that, hey, I went to him and in 3 months this event happened. He couldn't see it. Now, either the astrologer couldn't see it or the astrologer did not want to say it, whatever. But that's the complete feedback of all Indians. Now here, with Swamiji's life, okay, he might not have shown his horoscope to any astrologer, except his mother showed it. But point is, life is not a bed of roses. I don't want the younger generation growing on. Swamiji did discuss this a lot, and you all know I've been saying this in my earlier videos. Life is good, bad, ugly. Like the way humans are. No human is perfect or goody. Every human is having all the shades of grey, from black to white and all the shades of gray. So that's how life is. And what happens here in US is we have people who have been doing Western astrology, and it is an event-based astrology also, but also having a lot of psychological, upbringing to it, and the paint with loads of buckets of paint of psychology attached to it, and that's what you see in all these videos on YouTube. And I honestly believe that's not what is the real astrology.
No.
And you being here, you have funded all these astrological organizations via your company, and you know the good part, the bad part, the ugly part.
That's right.
Of astrology in US. Yeah.
And I know even the teachers and what they teach and why they teach what they teach.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
yeah.
and we expect you being a sannyasi, we expect you to via your story we expect, at least that's what I expect, that people should understand that here's a man who's born in wealth, okay? I mean, I do not know if the right term is stinking wealth, okay? Who was born?
No, it wasn't stinking, but it was wealth.
Okay, sorry.
Comfort, very good comfort.
Yeah.
Well, my own boss at a very young age.
Yeah, very young age. You dropped, again you got back on your feet, again you dropped, okay? So life for you is what's life for
everybody. Yeah.
But yes, you had real big lows,
right?
Okay, especially from where you were coming from.
That's the problem.
That's the reason we've been telling all this story.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the highs and lows, and then if you see, my first downfall was from wealth. Growing up in wealth is pretty much as a silver spoon. The second drop was from political success and the American dream. Because here we come, you have to have a good job, you have to have status, you have to have money, which is what I had in my late 20s. Okay, so that was my second downfall.
Third was when you were doing all this funding in California, right?
Yeah, and now this was my pursuit for Vidya, because I wanted to find out. You see, when my mother told me that story, the biggest question I had was, what would I have done differently if I had this information before? You see, and the point is, if my mother had told me this story a month earlier, I would have no value for it. You see,
but that was on the day you decided to give it up.
I decided I completely failed. I have no control, and it really sunk into me that there's nothing I could have done, because I tried everything for 2 years. And then I realized at that point that I cannot do anything more. And I have completely failed, because you see, we have to have a sense of guilt. I grew up with a father who constantly told me I was an idiot. So you grow up, part of Indian parents, fathers don't tell you who you are. So you have this insecurity from the beginning. But I overcame my insecurity here by competing with the best of the best in America and rising to the high rises. So the second rise was political, and then the third rise was knowledge. But it was not so much knowledge, the third rise was more luxury. But here's the point, my desire was to understand why we struggle so much. We as human beings were not born to suffer the pain. Why is it we're born? Are we here to really suffer?
If you were to ask me, as a layman astrologer, here's a secret that I've been hiding for some time, is how to see which relationship would cause you pain. Okay, the Karakatva is there, but right now let me not focus on the Karakatva in this. And I love making videos, where I have the wrong titles, so I'll just create a video like, how do I get sleep? Okay, and right at the end of the video, I'll spill out one of the biggest and unknown secrets of astrology.
Right.
For a Sagittarius Lagna, let's assume you're a Sagittarius Lagna. You remember the 6-8-12 principle that I talked about? Okay, I call it the super, like you have the Rahu Ketu axis, it's the karmic axis.
Exactly, yeah.
The 6-8-12, I call it the super karmic axis.
Yes.
Now, how do I see is, forget the planet placed for now in the 6-8-12.
Yes.
The Karakatvas of it, forget it. Let's assume we have a horoscope which is completely black.
Right.
No planet in 6, 8, 12. You see the lords of 6, 8, 12 and which Karakatva it represents.
Right.
So, for a Sagittarius Lagna, 6th lord will be Venus.
Right.
Woman in this person's life will be Karma. Now, let's assume yourself. Okay? Let's assume a Sagittarius Lagna person has not had any affair or any relationship. So, it's how you see it. They'll say, he never suffered through women. Okay? He didn't have a break. Okay? He didn't have a marriage. So, he's not suffered through women. Yes, because he did not suffer. Or he suffered. Both are extremes. Both are
Right.
karmic. So, women is karmic.
Definitely.
Then, it is Karka. In the 8th house, it is Cancer.
Right.
So, Lord is Moon. Mother is karmic.
Exactly.
So, in your case, mother comes with that sheet of paper with the prediction just
Exactly.
on the day. Are you understanding? It's such
Yeah,
a
exactly.
small.
It's
such a
subtle.
small event. It's
But-
if you look at it, Swamiji, it's. I mean, come on.
It's
In
trivial.
Indian house, so many mothers. I still remember my dad saying, the great Ghanshyam Joshi saw your horoscope,
Yeah.
and this is the prediction that is given.
Yeah.
Correct. So it's something that keeps on happening in our Indian society.
Exactly. Yeah.
But for you,
No.
it has to be a triggering point.
It
Why?
was.
It was. Why? Because it being in the 8th lord, and luckily it has the reinforcement, it reinforces itself by aspecting that house.
Exactly.
Chandra in the 2nd house aspects the 8th house in your
Absolutely.
case.
Absolutely.
Then you take the 12th lord.
Right.
The 12th lord is Mars,
Exactly.
because it is Scorpio. The other co-lord is Ketu.
Right.
Unfortunately, both of them signify siblings. Mars, obviously, siblings.
Right.
Ketu is sitting in your 3rd house, siblings.
Siblings. Exactly.
And that's where the drama is happening.
Exactly.
The
Completely.
drama, see, eventually it is like, eventually it is, if you throw this on other lagnas, very easily you'll come up. Like Mithuna Lagna, 12th lord is
Right.
Venus. Women has to be karmic. Then you double check with the actual horoscope. Is the karma being reinforced?
Right.
Is the hidden layer coming out
Right.
in actual with combinations of conjunctions of planets?
That's right.
Again, Mars,
Right.
6th lord, and Ketu.
Right.
Again, you catch it like that. And again, Saturn as the karma karaka and also as servants.
Exactly.
I'm saying as the first layer, take it only as relatives, as to the human form.
Exactly.
Second layer, go into the karma, profession,
Exactly.
and all that. Servants will be a key factor.
Right.
If they aspect the 6th house or the 3rd house or their lords and is afflicted, servants will cause agony.
Yeah. And they have
Agony.
in my life. Yeah.
Agony. So that's how you do it. But anyway, after this point, when you stop this business, when did you decide to go to the Sharan, the feet of a guru?